The Trial of Daniel Reeves, A Murder in Plain Sight. It is the kind of story that grips a courtroom and refuses to let go. A story that began with the quiet life of a small town, shattered by violence, then carried through months of investigation, and finally to a trial that would divide a community. This is the case of Daniel Reeves, a man accused of murdering his wife in a way so brutal, so unexpected, that people still talk about it as one of the most haunting trials of the decade. The story begins in the town of Ashwood, a quiet suburban community tucked between rolling hills and farmland. Life in Ashwood was predictable, calm, and ordinary. Neighbors knew each other's names. Families gathered on front porches. The kind of town where nothing much happened, until one late summer evening in 2016. That evening, a frantic 911 call came through. A man's voice, panicked, shouting into the phone, "My wife, she's not breathing. Please hurry, she's not breathing." It was Daniel Reeves, a 36-year-old mechanic, calling from his modest home at the edge of town. When paramedics arrived, they found his wife, Emily, lying lifeless in the living room. She was only 32 years old. She had bruising around her neck, her lips tinged blue. Despite attempts to revive her, Emily Reeves was declared dead at the scene. At first, it seemed like a tragedy, a young woman gone too soon, perhaps from a sudden medical emergency. But then the details began to unravel. The responding officer noted something strange. The room was too orderly. There were no signs of a struggle, yet Emily's injuries suggested force. A coffee mug sat neatly on the table, untouched. The television was still playing softly. Daniel, however, looked disheveled, his shirt stained with sweat.
During questioning, Daniel claimed that Emily had collapsed suddenly while watching television. He insisted he had tried to perform CPR, but the paramedics noted his technique was inconsistent, as if he hadn't really done it. The medical examiner's report would later reveal the truth. Emily Reeves had been strangled. Her death was not an accident. It was homicide. When investigators confronted Daniel with this evidence, he denied everything. He insisted someone else must have broken into the house. Yet there were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked, the windows closed. The only fingerprints in the house belonged to Daniel and Emily. A week later, police arrested Daniel Reeves and charged him with the murder of his wife. The case captured headlines immediately. Small towns thrive on routine, and when something shatters that peace, the story spreads like wildfire. People whispered in grocery stores. They speculated at church gatherings. Could Daniel really have done this, or was there another explanation? The trial began the following spring, and from the very first day, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches. Locals lined up outside just to get a glimpse. Everyone wanted to see the man accused of murdering his wife in cold blood. The prosecution painted a chilling picture. They argued that Daniel Reeves had been leading a double life. Behind closed doors, his marriage to Emily was crumbling. Friends would later testify about heated arguments, about Emily confiding that she felt trapped. Prosecutors allege that Daniel snapped one night, strangling her in a fit of rage, then staging the scene to look like a medical emergency. Then they pointed to the autopsy. The bruising on Emily's neck was consistent with manual strangulation. There were small hemorrhages in her eyes, the kind that only occur when pressure is applied to the airway. The time of death lined up almost exactly with the 911 call, meaning Daniel was present when she died. Then came the most damning piece of evidence, Daniel's internet search history. On his phone, investigators found late-night searches from just days before Emily's death, searches that read, How long does it take to strangle someone? How to make it look like an accident? The courtroom gasped when those words were read aloud. For the prosecution, this was as close to a confession as they would ever get. But the defense fought back with equal intensity. Daniel's attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no video footage, just assumptions. They painted Daniel as a grieving husband who had lost his wife suddenly, only to be wrongly accused. The defense brought in their own experts. A forensic pathologist testified that Emily's injuries could possibly be explained by a rare medical condition combined with Daniel's clumsy CPR attempts. They suggested that stress and speculation had pushed investigators to focus unfairly on Daniel. And then came Daniel himself. When he took the stand, he was calm, composed. He looked directly at the jury and swore he had never harmed his wife. He spoke about their marriage, about their shared dreams of starting a family, about the pain of losing her. At moments, his voice cracked with emotion. For some jurors, it was convincing. For others, it was a performance. The most dramatic moment of the trial came with the testimony of Emily's sister, Claire. She recounted how just a week before her death, Emily had called her in tears. She said she was scared of Daniel, that he had a temper, that he had grabbed her during arguments. Claire's voice shook as she told the jury she said she didn't feel safe anymore. The defense objected, arguing this was hearsay, but the judge allowed it, and in that moment, the entire mood of the courtroom shifted. Day after day, witnesses took the stand. Neighbors testified about hearing raised voices in the Reeves home. A coworker recalled Daniel complaining about his marriage, saying things would be easier if Emily was gone. The prosecution built their case piece by piece, each detail stacking on top of the last. But the defense clung to doubt. They reminded the jury that no one had seen Daniel commit the crime. They emphasized that police never recovered physical evidence tying him directly to Emily's death. In America's justice system, they said, doubt meant acquittal. When closing arguments came, the courtroom was electric with tension. The prosecutor's voice rang with conviction. She told the jury that Emily Reeves could not speak for herself anymore, but the evidence spoke for her. The bruises on her neck, the searches on Daniel's phone, the fear she had confided to her sister, all of it pointed to one conclusion: Daniel Reeves murdered his wife. The defense countered with equal force. They told the jury that the state wanted them to fill in the blanks with assumptions, that grief, shock, and sloppy CPR could explain what happened, that Daniel was being punished not for what he had done, but for who he was.
The jury deliberated for 2 full days. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with anticipation. Reporters camped outside. Families waited in silence. Finally, the jurors returned. The foreman handed the verdict slip to the judge. The judge unfolded it slowly, the words echoing through the chamber. Guilty. Daniel Reeves was convicted of second-degree murder. Gasps filled the room. Emily's family embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces. Daniel sat motionless, his hands folded, his eyes staring at the floor. When asked if he wanted to speak before sentencing, Daniel stood, his voice low. He insisted he was innocent, that one day the truth would come out, but the judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The trial was over, but the questions lingered. Some in Ashwood believed justice had been served. Others whispered that maybe, just maybe, the wrong man had been convicted. After all, trials are never as simple as they seem. Evidence can be interpreted. Testimony can be flawed. Memory can be fragile. What happened in that courtroom remains a reminder of the complexity of justice. A young woman lost her life.
A man will spend the rest of his days behind bars, and a small town will never forget the trial that tore it apart. The case of Daniel Reeves is a haunting one, a murder in plain sight, or the tragic story of a man condemned by circumstance. The answer depends on whom you ask. But the one truth everyone agrees on is this: Emily Reeves deserved better. And that, perhaps, is the greatest tragedy of all.